Dancona says the Tories are a party in crisis, with Theresa May out of her depth and out of time. Gove is the man, according to Clare Foges in The Times. The Environment Secretary is the only Conservative with bold ideas, imagination and urgency to defeat Jeremy Corbyn, David Cameron's former speechwriter says. Tory gridlock from checkers to no deal. The Conservatives are going nowhere in Blower's cartoon in The Telegraph, which I think is probably a reference to Birmingham's favourite spaghetti junction. Everything's come crashing down at the Tory conference. That's in Morland's nightmarish vision in The Times. And Kevin Maguire in the Mirror says Labour was fizzing with fresh ideas in Liverpool, but to enter the Tory conference is to leave hope behind for a tired and bitter blue wilderness. And Boris Johnson, in his regular column on a Monday in The Telegraph, turns his attention to animals in his Telegraph column this morning, suggesting that Britain should do more to save elephants with the foreign aid budget. Well, joining me here in Birmingham to look through those are the Conservative commentator Tim Montgomery and the Observer's chief leader writer Sonia Sodha. Welcome to you both. Right, Boris Johnson writing about elephants and foreign aid on the week that he's making his bid for the top job. Is this a shrewd move?
Well, I'm wearing my elephant's tie today. I'm very on message with
You're a Republican elephant tie.
That's true. Yeah. I think I agree with Boris on Brexit, but I think I've probably read enough articles by Boris Johnson on Brexit, and I think if he's serious about becoming Prime Minister sometime in the future, he needs to talk about broader subjects, and the extinction of elephants, or the dangers of that in parts of the world, and the use of the foreign aid budget, which is the other topic really underlying his article, is, I think, a beginning of a much greater push for him to talk about those wider subjects, because the Tories don't just have a Brexit problem, they have a battle of ideas problem, full stop. They're not addressing the other big issues that we face, and he can show he can.
I mean, it struck me a bit of a gift to the cartoonist that Boris in danger of becoming a bit of a white elephant.
Absolutely, elephant in the room, I think. That everyone is actually talking about, so perhaps not so much the elephant in the room. But I agree with Tim. I think what he's doing here is trying to sort of broaden out a little bit. I think he'll have thought about the timing in the run-up to this conference quite carefully. We saw him do his big 4,000-word Brexit piece, which was deeply unhelpful to the Prime Minister last Friday. He's speaking at his one and only Fringe event, I think it's tomorrow, so that will be to sort of generate the headlines on the morning of the Prime Minister's speech. So we probably thought with those two big interventions it's time for me to say something perhaps a little bit different here. And I think, talking about the international aid budget, that is him making a pitch to Tory members on an area that they might agree with him on other than Brexit, because we know that that's something that Conservatives can get quite anxious about.
I mean, he says it is a British priority to spend foreign aid saving the elephant. Is that really true?
I think he's just calling for... There's been a lot of debate, particularly since the Oxfam incident earlier this year, as to whether the development charities that we put a lot of British taxpayers' money, channel it through, are spending money wisely. And I think it's a budget that the British people do not always understand where that money is going. And I actually think if you start to have a few flagship projects that British aid is associated with, like saving creatures we can all identify with, you're not actually challenging the aid budget. I think you're potentially saving it. So I don't read this as something critical of foreign aid. I think it's about making it just more saleable to an electorate that is sceptical.
There is part of me that does wonder, though. Now, his old friend, now perhaps foe, Michael Gove, has actually made quite a success of talking about animals in relation to kind of Conservative policy. So there is a bit of me that thinks this is maybe quite a cynical move by Boris to sort of, jump on that animal bandwagon.
You criticise, Conservatives when they don't have ideas, and then when they have an idea that's popular...
Well, that brings us on to Michael Gove and that column by Clare Foges. Worked with Michael Gove, basically saying he's the man who's got it to lead the Tories after Mrs May.
Well, it's an incredibly enthusiastic pitch, I think your viewers will find if they read the column for Michael Gove. And she makes a couple of points, which, you know, I can see where she's coming from. So one of the things that she says is that Michael Gove, you know, he's a really kind of vigorous reformer, whichever department he's in, whether it's education or justice. Now, I happen to disagree very strongly with some of the things he's done in education, agree with him maybe more perhaps on justice. But he does have a real reforming zeal. Nothing that Michael Gove touches will stay the same. But I have to say, I'm a bit sceptical even after reading Clare's column. I just don't think he's got, you know, Tory leadership contenders. They need to get to the last two on the ballot. They need to have support from MPs, and then they need to be voted on by members. And I would suspect that he just doesn't have the support that he'd need from either MPs or members.
I agree with that, and I think the problem for Michael is he's alienated, you know, the Remain part of the minority in the Conservative Party by his leadership of Vote Leave, and then by backing Chequers, which is so unpopular with the grassroots, he's almost alienated the other wing. So I don't think he's a runner. But what he does prove is a lot of rubbish, I think, is spoken that because of Brexit, ministers can't do anything. It sucks up all the oxygen. The stuff that he's done, you know, very much in line with Sky's campaign on ocean rescue, you know, on plastics, on puppy farms, on animal welfare generally, proves if you're a minister with beliefs and your determination, stuff still can get done. Matt Hancock's doing the same at Health, Sajid Javid at the Home Office. They're strong enough to overcome this resistance, control freakery that I'm afraid we've got at number 10.
OK, well, here's another man that some people talk about as a possible future contender for the leadership, Dominic Raab, recently appointed, of course, Minister for exiting the European Union, taking over from David Davis, addressing conference.
We need to keep a sense of proportion. Everybody had a vote. Most people have an opinion. But only a small minority think it's worth fighting over, except when they're on Twitter. It's important to remember that the person sitting next to you, on the bus into town, at your desk at work, round the breakfast table, and yes, here in this hall today, may have voted the other way to you in the referendum. That's the genius of our democracy. We express our differences at the ballot box, but afterwards we come together and respect the result. When it comes to wanting what's best for Britain, we're all on the same side. As someone who campaigned to leave, not only do I respect the opinions of those who wanted us to stay in the EU, I'd go further. I think they made some important arguments and highlighted some difficulties that some on my side were too quick to dismiss. Disentangling our laws, our institutions, our economy from Brussels after more than 40 years of EU membership was never going to be entirely straightforward or risk-free. To rise to the challenge, we'll need some unity of purpose. And I believe we're at our best when we work together to forge something bigger than the sum of our parts, as a government, as a party, and as a country.